Hello, Internet friend. Today on ValueSide Conversations, a discussion with Ron Bengtson on America's path to financial independence. And it'll come as no surprise that America is drowning in debt. We read about it every day in the financial and general press, and pundits warn of the dire consequences of the debt load. And we see it in the data, almost $39 trillion in government debt, for which the interest payments alone are nearly $1 trillion annually. Credit cards, which many of us have to depend on to meet our monthly expenses, now have an average interest rate of about 21%, nearly double the 12% rate of just 4 years ago. And all this is true for various corporate loans as well as unsecured individual and institutional loans. Debt is multiplying faster than most of us borrowers can keep up. If something isn't done and fairly soon, large sectors of the economy could go technically bankrupt. What we need is a plan, a way to get out from under this incredible debt burden. Joining me today is Ron Bengtson, the person who points us in the right direction. Ron was fintech before that word even existed. He was one of those back-office wizards who programmed the computers that process bank payment systems, from cash withdrawals to check clearance to all the various ways money moved through the banks and into your wallet. He started at the very beginning of the so-called automation of the financial services industry, a time I recall well. I remember when East Coast checks used to take 2 weeks to clear for West Coast clients. When traveling to another state, unless you had traveler's checks, meant you might run out of funds. You can thank Ron and the many other financial programmers throughout the financial sector for creating today's seamless, nationwide cash system. Now, Ron has recently published his book, The MAFIA Paradigm. That's Make America Financially Independent Again. Ron, what motivated you to write the book?
Hi, David. Thank you for having me on, and to your viewers, I apologize for my lighting here. I'll have that corrected next time. The book itself, you said I'd give you a little image of it. Your side would probably come out better. It's on Amazon.
Mine is better.
Yeah, there you go. And I've got the price down as low as Amazon will allow me, just to get the information out. So writing the book, there's 2 things. One, it's a compilation of writings that I've been working on for years. And it's on Amazon because I was sending it out to legislators and people on PDF. But then I found Amazon has this do-it-yourself. And it's technical to do it, but it didn't cost, I set it up, I got the manuscripts, you load it up, and it prints per order. It's not on their shelves, and it's an incredibly good way to read this stuff. It's what we're going to talk about is quite complex, but with David's help, we'll bring it down to the general concepts that people need to embrace, to get your mind around, because the concept, we know things are not going well, and you've had warnings, almost occult wolf warnings, because we've been warning about this for 2 decades now. And and the legislators, because they're focused on the news cycle. So how do we get them focused on solving this debt problem? And what's being offered is horrible. The legislators won't do it. Cut. And that's not going to happen. We'll just go off the cliff before they do that. So this is preemptive. And there's two components of it. David and I have talked about. You have the public debt, which is enormous. I mean, you have your municipal and state debt, another thing, but it's our credit cards is for the population, general population. And then you have the national debt, $38+ trillion. So I've been working on 2 solutions. One does not depend on the other, but understanding both, and that's the paradigm. So in the book, I call it 2 pillars. So one is the national payment system. So we're going to talk about now, and the other is the national debt, and the focus on it is to remove the interest payments. We're paying this year $1 trillion of interest on our national debt. Now, if you take $1 trillion and divide it by 50 states, that would be $20 billion a year for each state. It's enormous. Okay, so my motivation is to get you, the viewer, to embrace this, and I don't have an organization, but it needs to be focused so that intensity, well, maybe I'll word it this way. How do you get these concepts from concept to legislation? So I guess what I'm answering you, David, is that's my motivation is to get this so it's explained.
Sure.
The payment system, most people who have an interest and do their own finances will understand it. The national debt system is, once it's understood, it's incredibly simple, but the way we're doing everything now is, that's what we call paradigm. You know the word paradigm shift, paradigm, and I knew that had to be part of the title. It's a new paradigm that we're looking at here, and so MAFIA, and then I shared with some friends, and they're going, "Oh, what a cool title," because it just, the MAFIA paradigm.
Of course.
So the motivation is, I know this works, and how do you get it out there? But it's a superior system. We're talking about creating a national payment system. So I use an analogy with our national highway system, the interstate highway system, and it took a lot of political muscle to get that on the president's desk to sign it, and that was President Eisenhower. And from reading history, that what flipped Eisenhower to absolute yes is when he understood that he could drive his tanks on this. Because you're post-World War II, and if people know the history of World War II, Mexico sided with Japan and Germany. So we had a southern border concern there. But anyway, so it was a national concern that went beyond just people using the interstate. But the benefit of the interstate to commerce, that toll-free access to these amazing highways that connect us. So the analogy is we need a payments highway of the same magnitude. And that's going to take congressional legislation that the president signs. And same way that they did it with the interstate highway system, is the federal government paid for the construction. Of course, private enterprise did all the construction, local carpenters and everyone. So we're not talking about the libertarians go, we don't want a government system. Well, that's another argument. But we need to get this funded as a highway system that we the people own. We trust our transportation department in the federal government that oversees our highway system. So a payment system would be the same way. And then we as a people, no, this is our payment system. And you're not getting ripped off. What you're doing now, if you go back 20 years ago, you carried cash in your wallet. Now you're pulling out your bank debit card or your credit card. And Visa and MasterCard have a windfall of hundreds of billions of dollars because it costs them pennies to do these transactions. So to have a national debit card, in terms of you, the consumer, it's no different. It's really going to be a bank debit card. But the bank is using a national system that connects all the banks and all the accounts together. And it's seamless. So to the individual consumer, the motivation's not that high, except for what David wanted to talk about, if you're the temptation to put everything on credit. So it's at a national level that you see the benefits would be enormous. And we can go into more detail how to use this card. So what we're talking about is the specifications for the card would be done by a national team. And so what it would amount to is like APIs. We have the card, and the manufacturer of it, they'd put it out to bid. Just like the Army wants boots for their soldiers, they don't manufacture them themselves. So this is not the government doing socialism. This is a infrastructure. It's a financial infrastructure, and that's what governments are supposed to do. Okay, back to you, David.
Well, I was just going to say, so no, absolutely. So what we end up having is a national debit card, right? So, and what that does for all of those transactions, just like a regular debit card, it eliminates all the expenses, the fees, and so on that we normally see. And number two, it creates a huge, unbelievable sized credit facility, for lack of a better word, for that is the funds in the debit account before they're withdrawn. So we have a huge credit facility created from this, I think. Is that correct? Or
Yeah, the one of the things when we personally use our credit cards at a retail store, uh, you have your total credit limit available to you. So where if you had cash in your pocket, that's why I'm calling this the same as cash payment system, because to the merchant, there's no fee to the merchant, just like if you use cash. And so the benefit of what I believe you're talking about is credit, is the bank, we're talking about, if you read in the book, the little designs, different issues, and one is the credit issue, is that can be designed so that your bank itself can offer you a line of credit. So you don't have that third party where that's where you're getting your 20 and 30% interest rates, where your bank will give you a line of credit for maybe 10%. And does that answer what you're describing?
well, it seems to me that from the consumer point of view, you're eliminating interest and other fees, that even fees that might come with a debit card. And from the merchant point of view, you're eliminating all of those other fees that the merchant has to pay.
Yes.
So it's a benefit on both sides.
Yes, and I think to the individual consumer, it'll just seamlessly, like, the benefits will be there, but it won't change anything. The card will feel like your existing debit card, and you'll pull it out instead of cash, and hopefully you'll have the option of having your bank give you a line of credit. So if you run out of cash in your card, then the credit would kick in.
So in the debit card that I have currently, I have money in the bank, and that's where the debit comes from. And my question really is the broader picture. So we have 300 however many million people in America with a checking account, and in that checking account is a whole lot of funds, especially if it's an aggregate nationwide program. So the next question is, we have a huge debt over here, and traditionally banks use the credit in their bank accounts to offset the loans that they have on the other side of the bank.
So wait, did we switch over to the?
We did.
Okay, to the national debt.
Yes.
That's it. I'd like to. I hope your viewers will get the book. It's easier to have the paper book. David can offer. The whole text is on Medium. You can read it on the web. I think David can provide that link when here. The book is easier because you really need to study it, and the detail is really not there from a software engineer design point of view. That's not there. The detail in the payment system is really an overview that maybe you pitch to management to get a go-ahead. Sufficient detail so they can get, oh yes, let's do that. Then you bring in your design team and get into the detail. I'm saying that because anyone with a financial background and interest can read this and get it. It's meant for that. So there's a two-part system. So it's two pillars, I call it, of national financial independence. One is this massive new payment system that will give every user a debit card for that system. And that's also an international component. Before we go to the other, ideally we would work with our allies or our other nations, if we haven't alienated them too much already, is they would have parallel duplicate systems of their own, but these systems would talk to each other, which means your debit card for any country that has a parallel system would work just like your Visa and MasterCard will work when you go to Europe. Well, your USA debit card would work in France or Japan if they have parallel systems that we all agree upon. And the beauty of that, you get on the cryptocurrency side, they want this global currency, which would be an absolute disaster. But this then would function like a global currency to the consumer who's using it. But each nation keeps their own currency or monetary sovereignty. Okay, that's the payment system, and the national debt system. The two of them, one does not have to have the other, so they're not connected in that way. But the two, what it does to our country, and again, just like the payment system can be international, hopefully that will be the perspective for it. What I'm proposing in this book for the national debt is to eliminate the interest. Well, the system that's described there, every nation can do that as well. And what that does, people go, well, you can't do that, you have to pay interest. Well, I break it down, I build up the argument for it in the book, show you how it works, compare it with the existing system, which is treasury bonds. Government issues treasury securities, bills, bonds, and that's how it gets its money. But it pays interest on all those. So what's being proposed is stop that. All new debt financing, you do not use treasury bonds. The government, the treasury would become like a bank, where it loans itself the money with an obligation to pay itself back. So if the idea of itself is confusing, then you can put it as a separate system that the Treasury plunks into. Because right now, people don't, it's very esoteric banking, is banks have been given the authorization to create money that did not exist before. So when they issue a loan, say you get a loan for $500,000, they issue that loan and put the deposit for you in their bank. And that loan that they just issued to you, it's called credit. And it didn't exist before. So now you go spend that money, that $500,000, maybe if you're buying a house or whatever. And so as you make those payments, the bank then, it's an accounting thing. So they have a liability in that debit or the deposit they made. So as you're paying it down, each time it's going to zero. Well, the money that's paying it down then disappears, called destroyed, or it's uncreated, created, uncreated. And if you haven't heard this before, you're going, what? But it works. It's like a Swiss watch. But why have not we, the people's treasury, the Treasury Department, why does it been given the same privileges that the banks have of creating and then the obligation to destroy? So you're putting it out there and then you're pulling it back. So like a fishing line, you got whatever analogy works, but going forward, you would zero out. In other words, as we go forward, we still have this deficit spending, this addiction to spending more than we're bringing in.
Exactly,
but
yes.
As interest rates went up, the expense to the country, there's like an avalanche of debt coming. And what's the credit companies, the big international ones, the rating companies, who are they give ratings, they're worried about the country's ability to pay that interest. So this system cuts off new interest being created. And so eventually, if you project this out, these were the old treasury bills are, as they are paid off, going down annually, and you're not creating any more. In the future, all the debt, this 30, 40 trillion dollars, would be owed to ourselves, not anyone else. At that point, because the money is already out there and its impact on inflation is already assimilated, it's there. So you could zero that out. You owe it to yourself and no one else. And I'm proposing that in the legislation that would create the system is that the Congress gives itself the authority to do a one-time act to zero after all interest-bearing debt is paid off and folded into the new transactions or debt. You'd have the option to zero it out and start over for the next generation. And then if we had no debt and we're still spending $2 trillion a year more than we're taking in, I think it would become more obvious. And then you talk to these younger people who've already given up on buying a house, especially we're in San Diego. They got to buy $1 million home. Anything under that is. And so that it was on the local news last night, is one of the city council people who has the La Jolla area that said that San Diego is the most, use this phrase, the most patent dense region in our country, not Silicon Valley, because of all the biotech as well as everything that's in here. And where she is going with that is our human capital. How are you going to get these scientists, these young people to move here and live here to work in these laboratories? It's already established creative, all this new biotech and everything coming out. How are you going to get someone to move from Vermont or whatever college to San Diego? Yeah, they're going to pay them $200,000-$300,000 a year, but she's concerned with the entire human capital. You see, this subject, I want to stay with the book. There's a solution, but what's surrounding it is where I'm going. All these stories, there's multiple all over that we have to solve this problem of the debt. So let's take the interest off. Now, that's part two. I've got four parts. I broke it up into four parts. Part one is the payment system, and it's standalone. When you go to part two, don't bring the payment, start all over and imagine it. And then you hear the economists screaming and the bankers as you're reading part two, which is they eliminating the interest. And they're screaming, wait a minute, we need these treasury securities. There is a global market, aftermarket of treasuries. You buy a 20-year bond and you can trade it on the open market, but the government's still paying interest. And so that is such a huge global economic activity. So often in design, you solve a problem, but it creates another lesser problem. So I see the securities as a lesser problem. So we solved the interest problem in part two. We'll go to part three and say, okay, let's talk about the treasuries now. And I'm proposing, and at the end of that section, I'm telling, I need economists to model this. I don't have the skills or tools to make sure what I'm proposing is going to work. And that is through the Federal Reserve, we need to they give all the rules to the banks, to give the regional banks authority to issue the equivalent of treasury securities, an equivalent meaning that they're backed by the federal guarantees them. And I proposed, had a name change. That was your input, David. The name for that was a little screwy, so I changed it to Secure Bank Deposits, to keep a familiarity with your CDs. You understand, the CD is backed by the interest, federal interest. But these would be a new tool or product for the banks to issue to bring in, and it's the equivalent to the treasury bond, but the bank pays the interest, not the U.S. government. But so you still then have these instruments, equivalent of the treasuries, and have an aftermarket where they could be bought and sold. And why that's important is the Federal Reserve uses those when money dries up, like it did in the COVID, and it needs to pour money out into the economy. It buys these up on the market and then gives the cash back, so it's in the company. And when they want to pull money out of the economy, they sell the treasuries that they're holding. That's the Fed's balance sheet. And that takes money out of the economy. So they're kind of a lever, gas pedal type, brakes, gas pedal.
Right.
So they could do that with these, but the social benefit is that if you write the legislation that they can't use that money to invest in venture or these financial assets, don't let them do that. That they have, that money has to be used to invest in the local community. And can you see? So that's a whole nother subject. But I need economists to look at that. How big can it be, and how that money then moves out through the individual banks. And banks right now flip their mortgages because that gives them, so they can create more. They need more money. The proposal, would this make it so the bank wouldn't have to sell its mortgages, and so it keeps getting an interest income from their mortgages, and it uses this money for more investments in the community and the areas. If that worked, then we could get rid of that nasty Fannie Mae and which is the mortgage security aftermarket or mortgage. That's a huge. Well, that's what the derivatives in 2008. That's mortgages, and they're all concentrated into one area. Where if the bank kept the mortgages and got rid of that. Go ahead, David.
Well, I was just going to say we're going to have to kind of wrap it up here, but the book is available on Amazon. It's the MAFIA Paradigm. And is there any other place they can get the book, or is that basically on Amazon?
No,
okay,
you're free to
terrific.
go on Medium and read it as well.
Wonderful. I think this is an excellent beginning, and we have to take the first step. There's no question about it, and it's time that we start looking at some of the alternatives and so on. In your career, this type of back office money processing for banks and so on, that's what you did. And so you know that this is all a doable, marketable idea. Obviously, it's going to have tremendous political pushback, as you indicated. There's a lot of people making a lot of money on how the banks move. But I think it's a wonderful start. So thank you for coming on. I think it's a great idea. And that's our Value Line conversation with Ron Bengtson. His new book, The MAFIA Paradigm, can be purchased on Amazon, and we'll have a link in the description. I'm David Revelle. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, David.